So good morning, everybody. My name is Philippa Haynes.
And I'm Mark Lee. Welcome to this special review session of the Accountant Success Secrets podcast.
So normally we showcase, interview and celebrate successful accountants who are doing great things, have years of experience and whose stories can inspire and encourage other accountants around the UK.
Our aim is to provide some fundamental insights for you, our loyal listener.
But today we're going to do this in a different way to usual, as we don't have an interviewee. It's just us.
That's right. When we started the podcast, I thought it'd be a good idea to plan a review session after every 5 interviews. And this is now our second review podcasts. So we're going to try and share some of our key takeaways from another 5 of our wonderful interviewees.
Yeah, and I seem to remember that every time we said we could talk to them for hours. So this is just cherry picking some of the great insights. So let's start with Jessica Pillow, who runs Pillow May.
Okay, well, we don't need to go into the medical challenges that she's faced, but I think she admitted that they forced her to really look at how she managed her client workload. And a couple of points that came out of that, which are of wider application, are the way that she was enforcing deadlines and training clients both to not leave things to the last minute and to book time using her online calendar facility, which is something that I do as well. And when you're forced to do that because you've got family obligations, medical appointments and all the rest, it becomes second nature, and you stop worrying about whether clients will find it a challenge and would rather just be able to pick up the phone to you. Yes, of course they would, but you've got a business to run and you've got other obligations as well. And the great thing about, well, certainly Calendly, which is the one that I use and I think Jessica uses it as well, is nobody knows what else you're committed to. They just know when you are available for conversations and meetings with them. So I thought that was a real life example of the value from that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Jessica was a really interesting interviewee. I mean, she's all about pink wellies. I mean, we talked about that, and actually she's in her social media feed recently, she's talked about her wellies dying and having to buy some new ones which were the same color. Now obviously that is something that people start to recognize, but it is a part of her brand, and that was something that she chose really because of her farming background. I think from what she was saying, her original photography had her with her first baby in arms, and so she was making a real message around it being a female practice, about kind of the farming background. And since then she's actually taken on part-time staff who are working mums essentially. So by doing that, she's actually started to pull towards the team that she really wants, who are all in the same situation. And I think that's reflected in how the culture is working there. And she said that the values work really well. And by the way, they spell pink, the values do. Which I thought was...
They identified the core values back in 2012. And what was it? Personal service, to be inspiring, nurturing and kinship. And yes, when she mentioned kinship, that was the clue that they were looking for an acronym for pink. Yeah. But it's clearly absolutely fundamental to who they are, despite the growth they've had over the last 11, 12 years.
Yeah, and I think the really important bit here is about the values, is that every week they recite them together as a team and talk about them and, remind themselves. And whilst that may sound a little bit silly, actually it's really powerful, because what she says is it focuses the mind on the Monday morning when everybody's been here, there and everywhere. It gets everybody else back in the room again, which is great.
Yeah, and back in the room, or probably back on the Zoom.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't think they're all in one place all the same.
No. So who's on next? interviewee then,
Well,
Mark?
episode 9 featured Andrea L. Richards, who runs Accounts Navigator. And I admit, Andrea isn't somebody that I'd met or encountered previously. And but she approached us, which was wonderful. And a quick look at her website, at LinkedIn, and understanding a little more about her meant that she really stood out as an ideal interviewee, because we're always looking for people who are doing something a little bit different, that stand out and are achieving more than might be expected, especially if we don't know of them because they're not big all over social media. And I think Andrea is still looking at boosting her social media, even though she's very successful despite not being a big voice online. And she's serving specific niches. I remember she said that she loves understanding the numbers and processes behind the accounts, and explains to clients that she wants to be a partner in their business, and that not just an external accountant. And somehow I think she seems to achieve more than I know some accountants do in ensuring that clients understand that she really means that when she says it.
Yeah. I mean, she is a massive personality. I mean, anybody who listened to that or watched on YouTube, she really is. She's lots of fun. She's very chatty, which I think is fantastic in terms of client service. There's nothing better than that. But she does say as well that sometimes that has limitations, because she gets very excited. So when she's interviewing for new members of staff, originally she used to think, oh yes, we had a really good chat, that they'll make a great team member. And then she actually found that although they got on really well and the personalities matched, in fact the fundamentals weren't there. So being her, and she's quite direct and knows what she wants, she decided that she'd put in place a test that everybody had to take before they were officially kind of welcomed into the business. And that was all about getting beyond the personality. Now, don't get me wrong, she wasn't looking for somebody who was kind of a shrinking violet, but she did need to know that people could talk sense and talk about the business too. And that is particularly important because they have a client contact day on the 16th of every month, where they actually put aside their day job and pick up the phone and start talking to their clients, which I think is really important. If you've got that communication skills, you've got that personality, then that is absolutely what you should be doing.
In all the years I've been mentoring accountants, talking to accountants, I can't remember anybody else ever mentioning this client contact day once a month. She said that they do no work on that no conventional billable work, I think is probably what she meant. And literally they're just ringing clients and talking to them. What are you doing? How's it going? How's your last month been? And it just builds from there. Often the call's just 10 or 15 minutes, and it's showing that that Andrea and her team care, and it's helping ensure that they know what's going on with their clients. And I thought that was fab. But the other side of that is she doesn't give out her own mobile number to anybody. There's a shared office mobile number to help manage the client communications and limit the time that she's spending with clients if she doesn't want. I think she's probably got family responsibilities and other non-work related stuff too. And it's a way of managing that. And some, as with every interviewee, some great lessons for our listeners. And also the point you flagged just now, Philippa, about the recruitment is one that we're going to come back to, because similar points came up in other interviews as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's, we should mention that Andrea, as she said herself, suffered burnout and did suffer from exhaustion, and a couple of times had to rethink where she was going. Hence, not having her mobile phone because she was picking it up 24/7. So, she'd obviously been burned and learned the hard way, and then put in place those kind of rules, if you like. Good stuff. So who do we have next?
Well, episode 10, we interviewed Nikki Larkin, who runs Gorringe Accountants. And I admit I was confused because I see her online everywhere as Nikki Gorringe Larkin. And I'd assumed that was a middle name or a maiden name or something. But her name is actually Nikki Larkin, which is great. And I was so touched because quite early on, she mentioned that she recalled my advice to her 16 years ago and said it was great, which was I was thrilled because it was clearly genuine. Sadly, I don't think I ever found out what the advice was that she was referring to. Did you pick up on what it was, Philippa?
I didn't actually. I didn't. I mean, I think we were celebrating and we completely missed that one. I mean, the bit that I picked up on was very first of all where she talked about she was very strong at English and maths. So maybe we're talking yet again, a bit like Andrea, having the sort of the data skills, but also having those communication skills on top.
And that it's so important. And just sticking to that theme for a moment, later she said it's important to have someone like Mark or one of the others. Important to have people around you that you can be transparent with, share problems with, whether that's your management team or a group like my Soul Practice Club. Nikki said, and obviously I endorse, you need to have other people to talk with. And as she said, and I don't think we delved into it, she said, because there can be dark times.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, the one thing that I picked up, well, I picked up a lot, but it was about, there was a phrase that she said, which is, it's easier to get a new client than it is to get a new member of staff. Yes. In fact, I think she said easier and more, it's more expensive to get a new member of staff than it is a new client. And that came from, yet again, the learning of not always saying yes, but having that confidence, to the confidence of your convictions. You're a business owner, and to a certain extent, you need to take control of that business and that client portfolio too. And certainly she'd encountered rudeness over the years and found out that if that happens and you don't protect your staff, then actually you lose those members of staff and are left with the client. But actually that's the wrong balance. That's the wrong way around. In fact, what you need is to protect your staff and to make sure that it's very clear about what you expect in terms of behaviours from your clients. Again, it's about that training and that mutual respect, isn't it?
Absolutely. And a zero tolerance policy with rude and unreasonable clients, I thought was magnificent. And I remember a practice I worked with years ago, and the owner was telling me about this difficult client who paid them a lot of money. If you're talking about, if you've got 100 clients and you lose one client that's paying you £200 or £300, it's £200 or £300, but it's not going to have a major impact. If you've got 50 clients and one of them pays you £5,000 or 10,000 or whatever, if it's a significant sum and it's going to come off your bottom line, it's a more difficult challenge. But I'm always encouraging my clients to build their self-confidence and to have the courage to explain to clients what's acceptable and what isn't, and particularly if they've got staff, to recognise, as Nikki said, it's easier to replace a client than a member of staff. And the large firm, the larger practice I was talking about, I think they had about a dozen staff. Almost all of them had dealt with this difficult client at one time or another, and they're always coming and moaning about how they'd been treated, and the owner of the practice was having to placate them and say, I'm sorry about that. No, it's not acceptable. And I think after sort of the third time in a week, he resolved to tell the client where to go. And this wasn't a question, this wasn't a question of getting the client to modify their behavior. It was recognizing the client wasn't going to do that. They were a bully. They weren't going to change. and therefore it was, I'm sorry, we can no longer provide the services to you. The way my staff are treated is important to me. And he wrote the most brilliant email, which he copied to the staff, who recognized that he valued them and respected them. And it did wonders for cohesion and for everybody to feel wanted and respected. And it helped with staff retention, showing that the boss looked after the staff, not just ensuring that as much money was coming in as possible. And that sort of reflects back to what Jessica was saying as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, what Nikki also was talking about was that she's now decided to keep or cap the number of staff to around 20. She got up to nearly 30. And I think there is that theory that once you get up to 30, then in fact, the nature of the business shifts and the culture shifts. Then actually what you thought you were, suddenly you're really moving into a new era, and that requires quite a different approach to business. So I thought that was interesting when people are listening today, just thinking about those moments where the culture shift might happen. So I think it's between 1 and then there's, if you get up to 5, then that's particularly interesting, and then 15, but certainly the 30 mark it is one to watch.
Yeah, and also she said, rather than constantly seeking new clients, and this is something I've heard many times, rather than constantly seeking new clients, she wants to move her average fees higher and cap the number of clients, because that also means capping the number of client relationships. It enables her to keep to a manageable level number of staff. And I think, having been bigger, she's realized that more staff doesn't necessarily mean more profits. It can just mean more hassle and that many more client relationships. And that doesn't appeal to everybody, and it doesn't need to.
Yeah, I think that's reminded me as well. It's, I talk a lot about the ideal client, who you are and your brand and how you operate. So it's really important to set out your stall pretty quickly. And one of the things she talked about was not putting her prices up soon enough.
Yeah.
So, thinking that
wishing that she had, of course.
Yes, wishing that she had. So she's taken on smaller clients, thinking, oh well, I'll just charge them this, with the understanding that they were going to grow and stay with her, and then she'd reap the additional fees later. But of course, once that business had grown to a certain size, they then decided that they needed an accountant that was slightly larger to fit their needs for the business. So as she said, actually she'd lost those fees over the years because she never reclaimed them back. And that's something that, if anybody's wondering about fees and what to charge and higher fees, etc., that's definitely something to think about and set out your stall straight away.
Yeah, it's a very common story that accountants start up in practice. They realize, looking back, they weren't charging enough, but they were getting the clients in. Some of those clients leave because they then go to the next cheapest accountant that they can find. And those legacy clients, it's often difficult to push them up to pay the same as newer clients are paying. And again, it's a conversation I often have with one-to-one mentoring clients, and it comes up in the Sole Practice Club meetings too, that it's finding the right way that suits you to explain to those legacy clients that one of the reasons for increasing their fees to the same as everybody else is paying is it's then because that is both fairer all round, but more importantly, it means, much as I love you as being one of my early legacy clients that you believed in me and you started with me, the disparity has grown to such a stage that I'm tempted to prioritize other clients who are paying me what my colleagues consider to be decent fees,
Yeah.
rather than doing extra for you because we're not earning as much. And my heart wants to carry on doing that, but my head says focus on the clients that are paying us good money. And I want to treat you the same. I want to treat you better than them.
Yeah.
And finding a form of words that helps manage that process, spreading the increase over 2 or 3 years if need be, but to bring them at least closer to normal fees is really important. And it's the frustration amongst accountants who haven't done that yet is palpable.
Right, let's move on to our episode 11, which was Vanessa Fuller, who runs Premier Tax Solutions. And she was very interesting because I know that she was talking a story of automation based on some really sort of tricky situations. What did you pull out, Mark?
Well, I was intrigued when we first spoke to her. I can't remember if she approached us. I think she did.
She did, yeah, she did.
Yeah.
She's on maternity leave at the moment, in fact.
That's right, yes. And I thought, well, she's a tax practitioner, not an accountant in practice, because the name of the practice is Premier Tax Solutions. But when we checked up beforehand, she said, no, that's just what we call the practice. And to be fair, I'm not... that may have sounded disparaging. I didn't mean it to. She and her business partner do have a tax background and started the practice focused very much around tax returns before expanding into other bookkeeping and accounting services. But she kept the brand focus on tax because that's what attracts the right type of clients for her and her business partner to the practice. And I think it was Vanessa who talked about profiling the team to help clarify different skills and preferences and to distinguish, for example, those who love networking from those who love the detail of some aspects of client work, and avoiding, as she's learned, I think, and it's a point that Andrea mentioned earlier, has learned as well, as have many others, that you don't necessarily, in fact, you very rarely want everyone to have the same personality type in the practice.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, we can talk about ideal client, and I think she does have a couple of sectors in particular that she focuses on, but equally within that, people are different and personalities are different. And I think it's incredibly clever or insightful to match the profile of the client with the profile of that team member so that they have amazing conversations. That's a light bulb moment for me. Really simple, but with all of these disc profiling, whatever, that to me seems perfect.
Yeah, you're right. And I remember I also sort of had shivers when she mentioned that. Yeah, I don't know if she formally personality profiles the clients, but just recognizing, quiet clients with a quieter staff member, big, loud, brash people with a loud, brash person. And that's not always what everybody wants, of course. No. Some people will come to the quiet accountant because they want somebody who's focused and isn't like them. It's not as easy as it sounds, but what a terrific idea. I also, of course, loved the fact that Vanessa is a big fan of coaching, and she's not one of my clients, but she stressed the importance of setting and writing down clear personal and business goals, which most coaches and mentors would encourage their clients to do as well. And we do it with many accountants will ask their clients about their personal and business goals to help ensure they're growing the business to achieve those ambitions. Do accountants do it for themselves as often as they might? Not always.
Just before we move on to Kieran, who is our last guest of this particular session, I wanted just to talk about Vanessa, because I think this is a really important point for those who are setting up their business or they're early in their practice. So she was talking about how they used to use Facebook a lot for their marketing, and how useful it was to sort of pick up prospects and clients there. And she's actually moved away from that, because she says, that Facebook has changed, and actually she wasn't getting those valuable clients anymore, which I can totally understand and agree with that. And she was in fact focusing in on LinkedIn, which is where she started to talk about myself and her. She was working with her business partner, on their personal brand, because she actually realized that whilst having a really good portfolio of clients, she needed to get onto LinkedIn, she needed to do more marketing to be out there. But in order to push through and be seen, certainly on LinkedIn, she wanted to create that personal brand. And now that she's back from maternity leave, I think she's only just come back, it's given her that moment where she wants to then boost her activity. And I think you'll find her a lot on LinkedIn at the moment, which is fantastic.
I think that's right. And I think I pushed her when she said she was been getting work from Facebook, because I typically, not always, but I typically only hear that from people who are starting up and they're getting smaller clients, personal tax clients, sole traders, as a result of their involvement in relevant sector groups generally, rather than just being on Facebook. But the question is, are you, whatever medium you're using, is that enabling you to get to the people you most want to have as clients? And I think as Vanessa's practice grows, Facebook is less the target for her, and she sees LinkedIn as an easier, better route to the type of people that she wants to be working with. A really, really good point. So we've just got time then to mention our guest from episode 12. As you said, that was Kieran Phelan, who runs Satoria Accounting.
Yeah, I mean, he was great, and he talked about a lot of things. One of them was about the first zero partner, quite a few years ago now, which I think is really impressive. But I'll maybe leave you to sort of talk about that, if that's something you noticed. The thing that pulled me to Kieran initially was his self-confessed introversion. He said very much on one of his posts that, while saying that he's a key speaker and he's the kind of the owner of a practice, he really does struggle with being introverted as well. And so I was really keen to understand how he navigated that. And I think he's put in place several kind of strategies to overcome that. One of which is he'll work from home if he just needs a day to kind of decompress. And so his staff will know that, because actually quite recently he's made them aware of that. I think he did a profile of himself and he was really surprised, or actually I think his son was had been profiled, and suddenly he noticed quite a few attributes that were similar, and he started to talk to his staff about it. And that was really good and really useful for everybody, because they then understood, how he worked, his behaviors, his motivations, and sometimes, the way that everybody interacted. So some days he's very strong at working with team members, other days he just needs a bit of time to himself. And I think the more transparency you can have with your communications and with your staff, and equally with your clients, the better relationship you'll have, because at the end of the day, it's all about authenticity and being you.
Absolutely. A great analysis there, Philippa. And I liked also the fact that he talked about scaling the practice rather than just growing it.
Yes.
And recruiting people with different skill sets rather than just more staff to do client work, recognizing what he was good at, what he wasn't good at. Something, again, I've talked about many times over the years about, in my words, there's this concept of finders, minders and grinders. People who go out and find the work, and there's a variety of skills you need there. People who mind the work, look after the clients and the team, variety of skills there. grinders are the ones who do the work. That's great. And I added in binders, people who actually look after themselves and the team and the firm as well. There's a variety of skill sets, and it's unrealistic to expect one person or two or three people to be able to cover all of them if you're looking to scale or to grow your practice.
Absolutely.
I also like the fact that he gets staff to call clients during the year rather than just emailing them across the year and only calling them in January. And I think I'd already picked up on this before we spoke to Kieran, that I think over the years we perhaps haven't recognised, accountants haven't recognised, that some of their clients may be neurodiverse. And the reason they respond to the phone call chase in January rather than all the emails they've had till then could be because they're neurodiverse and they can understand and appreciate what's required from a phone call. And maybe if that phone call had been made in September, October, November, the information would have been forthcoming that much earlier. So that goes back to Vanessa's point about profiling clients, of course, as well.
Good.
And he also had core values for the firm, stressed the need to walk the talk, and this key point, I think, which I know you'll endorse, Philippa, those core values need to be more than just something you put on your website and on your wall.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when he was introducing values, he was very much, it's got to be more, as you said, than being on the wall, but it's actually got to match the people in the room, the team themselves. It has to resonate. It's not just something that you pull out of the air. It's actually something which you can all work with. And I would really counsel anybody who's thinking about the values and the culture of their business to make that a group exercise, rather than kind of giving people a book or series of words and saying this is what we're about. It does need to be a living and breathing document and ethos, which is constantly assessed, revisited, and worked on.
Yeah, well, it's very, very much your ballpark, your wheel.
Yeah, it's part of it. I mean, it's very much part of the brand. It's the foundational piece, which is, this is what we represent. You may see the logo and the design and, great copy and the ideal client. But then once you've caught the attention of somebody, it's actually, so what are our core values? How are we going to work with you? What are you going to expect? And how do we work within our team? And that is as important as the other stuff. So if you imagine your website, your homepage is pretty much the menu of who you are and what you do. The about page is very much about how you work and what your ethos is. And actually that is one of the key pages within your website that you really need to get right.
Yeah, 100%. I think the advice we could share on effective websites
exactly
would last more than one or two podcasts. But exactly. We will start bringing things to a close. We'll plan another review session in the next month or so. For now, though, listeners, do please get in touch with Philip or with me if you've been running your practice for at least a few years and you've got a story that you're happy to share.
Yeah, and we've got a couple of great new guests coming in the next couple of weeks, so watch out there. But you'll find all of the interviews and episodes we've mentioned on LinkedIn, on Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. So it would be wonderful for you to take a listen, give us a review, so that we can reach an even wider audience. Please let us have your feedback, share the love online. And of course, if you're interested in being a guest in March and April, then do let us know.
Yeah. And just before we finish, let's share our contact details in the traditional way. So Philippa, how can listeners find out more about you and Insight 101?
So of course I'm on LinkedIn. But I think the best way of getting in touch with me is via my website, insight101.co.uk, and there you'll be able to book a 15-minute session with me to talk about your needs. And Mark, how are we going to find out more about you and your Soul Practice Club?
Thank you, Philippa. Well, a new website launching soon. I think I've been saying that for a few weeks now, so I better allow my website to press the button. But online everywhere, I'm Bookmark Lee. So for those of you watching in colour, I'm holding up my Bookmark business card, bookmarklee.co.uk. I'm Mark Lee FCA on LinkedIn, just to distinguish me from the over 5,000 other people with whom I share my name. And there's a page on the website about the Soul Practice Club as well. We meet on the second in the morning online on the second Tuesday of each month. So at the time of recording, we have our next meeting next Tuesday.
Yeah, that's it. We're done. We've talked through, and I think probably we've only skimmed the surface, but some really insightful stuff there. So that's us. Let's bring this to a close, but we've got another exciting guest coming up for you next week. So we hope to see you then.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Philippa. And thank you for listening. Until next time on the Accountant's Success Secrets podcast or anywhere else that we might meet online or in real life. Goodbye for now.
Bye for now.